Hello, and welcome to Portfolio Matters. In today's podcast, I'll be doing the second part of the Beginner's Guide to Bonds, how to calculate the yield to maturity and duration. But before we get going, a quick reminder of the different types of yield as we discussed in part one. So the coupon yield doesn't change. It's just the annual coupon payments divided by the par value of the bond. The running or current yield is the annual coupon payments divided by the current market value of the bond and is essentially the cash flow yield of the bond. The yield to maturity is the yield you will get from holding the bond to its redemption date and includes the return of principal on the redemption date. Now, the first two are relatively easy to calculate. The yield to maturity requires some calculation. Now, I'm going to go through 4 different ways of calculating the yield to maturity, 3 of which will use Excel, which I will assume everyone has access to. So this formula shows you how you can derive the present value of a bond given its known cash flows over time and a known interest rate. Now, the yield to maturity is that interest rate. So now, if you know the bond price and you know the cash flows, you can back out the implied interest rate. Now, that's actually done by trial and error, and the formulae in Excel actually do that by iteration, i.e. trial and error. Now, to illustrate the different ways of calculating the yield to maturity, we are going to use one bond, the 2030 4.75% UK gilt. So it has a coupon of 4.75%. Its redemption date is the 7th of December 2030, and it has 2 coupon dates per year, one on the 7th of June and one on the 7th of December. According to TradeWeb, on the 11th of November 2022, it had a yield to maturity of 3.2892%, and its price was 110.27. So that was the closing price last Friday. So the first thing to say is that for UK gilts, the yield is easily available from TradeWeb, which is free. All you have to do is register. So you do not have to calculate the yield to maturity for UK gilts. TradeWeb will do it for you. Okay, so method 1 is to use the rate function in Excel, and it requires quite a few inputs. So this is the formula. So it's equals rate, open brackets, and then various different elements separated by a comma. So the first element is the total number of payment periods, which is the number of coupons per year multiplied by the years to maturity. Then the second element is the value of the coupon payments, which is the par value multiplied the coupon rate divided by the number of coupons per year. Then the third element is the current price of the bond, which is entered as a negative, and that's very important. The fourth element is the par value of the bond, or its redemption value at maturity. And then element 5 is it's either 0 if interest is received at the end of the period, or 1 if it's received at the beginning of the period. And finally, you can enter a guess for the estimated yield to maturity, but that is optional. Okay, so let's go through that for the 2030 bond. So these are the inputs: par value of the bond, coupon rate, number of coupons per year, years to maturity. Now that is the difference in days between the purchase date and the redemption date divided by 365.25, which gives you 8.07 years. And finally, the current price of the bond. So if we feed all that into the formula, and this is really important, the formula assumes that the coupon payments are annual. And because the coupon payments are actually biannual, you need to multiply the results by 2 to reannualize it and give you the annual interest rate. So if we do all that, we get 3.291%, which is very close to the TradeWeb number of 3.2892%. Now, I really suggest you go away and try and mirror this calculation so that you understand how the rate function works in Excel. Now, why is the calculation slightly off? Well, we think, and thank you to Wayne J on our Discord channel for his help in this, we think it's because of the settlement dates. So when you purchase a gilt, it settles on T+1. And if you buy it on Friday, that means it won't settle until the following Monday. Or if you buy it on a Friday and there's a bank holiday, it won't settle until the Tuesday, etc. And that means that the date to maturity may be slightly off. And in this case, because we bought it on a Friday, if we adjust the purchase date to Monday the 14th, when we would have to hand over the cash to pay for the gilt, then we get 3.290%, which is very close to 3.2892%. And the remaining discrepancy is almost certainly due to some timing differences in the payment of individual coupons, some of which will fall on weekends and then be delayed to the next working day. Okay, method 2 is to use the IRR function, the internal rate of return function. And so the table on the left gives all the cash flows from the bond, together with the dates on which they'll be paid. Now, the IRR function does not use the dates that they're paid. It assumes that all the coupon payments and the final redemption payments occur at regular intervals. Now, of course, unless you buy the bond on a coupon date, that assumption is not going to be correct. The time to the first coupon payment will be different than the time between all subsequent coupon payments. And so using the IRR function will give you a rough estimate of the yield, but it won't give you a precise calculation. And using the numbers in the table on the left, you get 3.351%, which is pretty close to the TradeWeb official number, but slightly off. So method 3 is to use the XIRR function, which also uses the dates in the table on the left. Now that should give you a more accurate calculation, but it doesn't. Actually, feeding those numbers into Excel, you get 3.596%, which is less accurate than using just IRR. So beware. As previously, I really recommend, if you're going to try and calculate the yield to maturity using Excel, to try and replicate these numbers in this podcast by yourself and Make sure you get the same numbers that I do. Any questions, please get in touch either via email or on the Discord. And finally, you can use this rough formula. So yield to maturity equals the coupon payment, and that is the absolute coupon payment. So in the case of the 2030 gilt, it's 4.75 plus the face or par value of the bond, which in this case is 100, minus the current market price, divided by the number of years to maturity, which is 8.0711, as we know. And all that is then divided by, the face value, the par value, plus the market price divided by 2. And that gives you an answer of 3.308%, which is very close to the trade-when number and actually more accurate than either IRR or XIRR. So this rough and ready calculation, which does not require Excel, it just requires a calculator and a bit of paper, seems to be actually a very good way of calculating yield to maturity, and all you need to know. Unless you're a bond trader, knowing the precise yield is not really that important. What you want to know is the yield relative to other bonds and to equities. What matters is how yields change relative to other asset classes rather than their absolute yield. Okay, on to duration. And the bottom line is, you don't need to know how to do this. For our purposes, all you need to know is that higher duration equals higher price sensitivity to changes in interest rates. But we will go through how to calculate the Macaulay duration and the modified duration. So this is the formula for the Macaulay duration. And to do this calculation, you need to know the timing of all the cash flows. Okay, so this is from Investopedia. I would urge you, if you're interested, to go onto Investopedia and work this through. Okay, so let's imagine there is a 3-year bond with a 10% coupon that pays out interest semi-annually. So each year it pays out 2 coupons of $5, and it has a yield to maturity of 6%. So its net present value is 110.83. You can work this out using Excel. Now, using that net present value number, you can then work out the Macaulay duration. Column 3 gives you the present value of each cash flow. In order to work out the Macaulay duration, you then need to divide the number in column 3 by the total net present value and multiply by the time to receipt of that cash flow in years. And that gives you a Macaulay duration for this bond of 2.684%. Now, this is my own reproduction of the Investopedia calculation, and you'll see that I've added this extra column where the time to maturity in years is explicit. In order to get column 5, you multiply column 3 by column 4 and divide by 110.83, and that gives you a sum total of 2.684. And that gives you a Macaulay duration of 2.684 for this hypothetical 3-year bond with a 10% coupon yielding 6%. Okay, duration summary. So the Macaulay duration is the time it takes for the average cash flow from a bond to be received. Low coupon bonds have higher duration than high coupon bonds because more of the cash flow is from the redemption value. And we covered this in part 1. The higher the duration, the more sensitive the price of the bond is to changes in interest rates. Okay, moving on to modified duration, and that is derived from the Macaulay duration. Using this formula here for a bond with semi-annual coupon payments, and all UK gilts, for example, have semi-annual coupon payments. And we know that the Macaulay duration of our bond is 2.684. The yield on the bond is 6%. And so our modified duration is 2.61. So the modified duration gives us how the price of the bond will change for a 1% change in yield. So for each 1% change in yield, the price of the bond will rise or fall by $2.61. So in summary, the modified duration gives us the sensitivity of the price of the bond to changes in the yield and is derived from the Macaulay duration. So in summary, knowing how to calculate the yield to maturity can be useful when there are no websites available to do the calculation for you. If you're buying and selling UK gilts, then TradeWeb will give you the yield to maturity as of last night. But if you need to do the calculation yourself, then the rate function in Excel would seem to give pretty accurate results, although there will always be some discrepancy from the official number due to the exact timing of payments. The IRR and XIRR functions are actually less accurate. So if you're going to use Excel, use the rate function. But the rough yield to maturity formula that we presented earlier works just as well and does not require putting in all the individual coupon payments into Excel. And finally, duration. Well, all you need to know about duration is the higher the duration, the higher the price sensitivity of the bond to changes in interest rates. I have presented you with the formula for calculating the Macaulay duration and the modified duration, but really you don't need to know this. If you're tempted to calculate those yourself, well, please go on to Investopedia and work your way through the calculations. Okay, that's it. Thank you all for watching. Please can you press like and subscribe to the channel, and it is goodbye from me, Keith Jordan. Goodbye.
Full disclaimer. The material and information contained in this podcast is for information and entertainment purposes only and should not be relied upon for making a business, legal or any other decision. We may own or have a financial interest in any securities mentioned. Listeners should conduct their own research or consult a professional investment advisor before making any decisions regarding topics mentioned on the show. Whilst we endeavour to ensure that the information presented on the show is correct, we make no representations or warranties of any kind, express or implied, with respect to the podcast and website or to any information, products, services or related graphics discussed or presented in the podcast or website. Any reliance you place on such material is strictly at your own risk. You are solely responsible for the investment decisions you make. We will not be responsible for any errors or omissions in the podcast or website, including in articles or postings, for hyperlinks embedded in messages, or for any results obtained from the use of such information, nor will we be liable for any loss or damage, including consequential damages, if any, caused by a reader's reliance on any information provided by the podcast or website. Please do not listen to the podcast if you do not accept self-responsibility for your actions.